This video is a primer on The Expanse, intended especially for those who have it on their must-watch list but haven't gotten around to watching it yet. Equally, though, I hope this will be helpful for those who watched the show and felt at all confused by some of the higher concepts. I'm going to keep this as spoiler-free as possible. The few specifics of the show that I go into in any detail are inconsequential to the overall plot. The Expanse is an adaptation of a science fiction book series of the same name. It's authored by James S.A. Corey, which actually is a pen name for two co-authors, Daniel Abraham and Ty Frank. Additionally, the authors serve as writers and producers for the TV show, which accounts for why it's such a well-done, true-to-the-original work adaptation. As an avid sci-fi reader, I very strongly recommend reading the book series. You should go read it. Or read anything, really. Do people still read? At the beginning of the story, humanity has spread out from Earth and inhabits the entire solar system. There are three primary groups, Earth, Mars, and the Belters, called such because they primarily live in the asteroid belt that spans the vast distance between Mars and Jupiter. These three groups have been at political and socio-economic loggerheads for years, and tensions are increasing. Earth is all worn out and used up. The majority of the population is on the dole, not even working at all. All the bestest and brightest scientists, inventors, engineers, they've all migrated to Mars. A one-world government presides, the United Nations. Their territory includes Luna, our moon, and also many orbital stations and habitats around Earth. Mars, as previously stated, has most of the scientists, most of the talented business people, and is populated by an entire civilization working toward one single goal, terraforming the red planet. They live in domes, also inhabit the orbiting moons and various orbital stations. The Martian Congressional Republic rules ever since it broke away from Earth. The Martian Navy, it doesn't have the sheer numbers that Earth is able to field, but due to its technological advantage is very much more than a match for Earth. Thus, a tense stalemate between the two planets has existed for decades. Then there's everybody else, the Belters. These include the explorers, the antisocials, the renegades, the financially destitute. They've been largely forgotten about by the rest of the solar system until recently. The fledgling Outer Planets Alliance has emerged recently and is beginning to make a lot of noise. It hasn't quite figured out if it's going to be a terrorist organization or a legal political entity. It represents millions of Belters, all of who have some very legitimate gripes with the inner planets. Now, quick reminder, if you're enjoying the content, please remember to like the video and subscribe to the channel. It helps us out a lot. And now back to the list. The novels, and by extension the TV series, fall into the science fiction subcategory known as hard science fiction. Hard sci-fi stories are technically and scientifically consistent. The worlds conform to physics, generally as we understand it to the best of our current knowledge, based on Einsteinian and Newtonian laws. There's no magic hand-waving of lightsabers, teleporters, faster-than-light travel, or anti-gravity. As an example, Star Trek is soft science fiction. Most every other sci-fi show you've ever encountered is soft sci-fi. Now, Star Wars, however, in my opinion, isn't even science fiction. Its genre is fantasy with a futuristic setting. The Expanse is a very smart show, probably a lot smarter than you are. You absolutely have to pay attention, otherwise you will be lost, especially if you come into the show without having read the novels first. They don't really do exposition. And because so much of what happens is stuff you haven't really ever previously encountered in movies and TV, it can be a bit confusing and overwhelming. Much of what happens in the story occurs on spaceships or artificial habitats in space, such as cities built inside of asteroids. There is no artificial gravity, at least the way we're used to seeing it in soft sci-fi shows, where they don't even bother to explore the profound, absolutely mind-blowing implications that the ability to control gravity at will would have on a society. No, this is hard sci-fi, where if you don't want to be floating around in freefall all the time, you have to either attach yourself to the ship or find some way to simulate gravity. The characters in The Expanse, when in space, they're either floating around in zero-G, or they're attached to the floor with magnetic boots, or they're in some type of simulated gravity. Now, I refer to it as simulated gravity so as not to mix it up with the bullshit magic artificial gravity that we alluded to earlier. It's possible to simulate gravity through a couple of methods. The first is spin gravity. Like Ceres, or some of the ships like the Nauvoo, the spinning motion is actually throwing you away from its center, so rather than being pulled down, you're actually being pushed away. As long as there's a floor under your feet, it seems the same, at least mostly. Most commonly seen, though, is thrust gravity, using the force of linear acceleration. The ships burn their rockets non-stop, accelerating to the halfway point of any given journey. There, they do a maneuver called a flip and burn, basically so they can point their ship's ass at their target destination and decelerate, bleeding off all the velocity that they previously accumulated. Now, the advantage of this is it allows a constant simulated gravity, excepting for the very brief period that you're in freefall during the flip maneuver. The whole story occurs in the solar system, at least initially. Space is really, really, really big. Being hard sci-fi, they shy away from making silly handwave technology like warp speed, light speed, crap like that. Even just our solar system is freaking massive, but the authors, in their story, they posit the invention of what they call the Epstein drive. It's fusion technology that is massively efficient compared to what we have now. This gives ships the ability to burn throughout an entire trip. And this makes a huge difference. For us now, a trip to Mars at its closest point to Earth takes 7 months. Most of that journey is on the float, using no thrust at all. In the world of The Expanse, with constant thrust available, you cut that journey down to somewhere around 44 hours. Now think about that. The big old solar system gets a lot smaller with something like the Epstein drive. The books do a fantastic job of contemplating the effects that living in low-G, low-gravity environments will have on people. At our current level of technology, we're just beginning to obtain data on the long-term effects of what that does to a human body. In The Expanse, with the Martians and even more so the Belters, you have entire civilizations of people being born, growing up, and living in these conditions. The authors do posit some advanced drugs that assist in bone growth and development, pre- and postnatal issues, things like that. Martians tend to be lighter and skinnier than Earthers. All Belters, they're tall, super thin, generally very weak compared to the people that grew up in a gravity well. The show tries as best as budgets allow to show these differences. Most of the Belters, they tend to be skinny. Detective Miller, for example. Actor Thomas Jane is noticeably thinner than how he normally looks for his role. There's a memorable scene in Season 1 where a super low-G Belter is imprisoned on Earth. He's long, emaciated, and just being out of a water tank in Earth's gravity is considered gravity torture. Speed in space is relative. It's helpful to understand this. Things don't travel at such and such speed. They don't go 500 miles per hour or whatever. They only do so relative to something else. Everything literally is in motion. Planets, stars, galaxies, spacecrafts, you, me. A ship that's not thrusting is effectively still, with a zero-G felt inside it. All the people inside are on the float. A valid perception of such a ship, even though it may be whizzing away from our planet, if it's not thrusting, it's effectively sitting still while the rest of the objects in the universe are moving around it. Rather than speed, it's better to think in terms of thrust and acceleration. A ship is either accelerating or not. Really, even deceleration is just simply a perception. You're decelerating as you approach your destination planet, sure, but just the same, you're accelerating away from it, just not as fast as the planet is moving towards you. It's catching up to you as you thrust away. So, usually in hard sci-fi, people measure the nebulous concepts of speed and velocity by stating how many Gs, which is the force equivalent to 1 Earth gravity at sea level, so how many Gs you're thrusting at. Terraforming is complete bullshit. A lot of sci-fi deals with the concepts of taking an alien planet and using technology to transform it into an environment sustainable for human beings. In The Expanse, the vast majority of Martian society has been dedicated to this very purpose for decades. The problem is, long before a society attains the technological ability to complete such a massive undertaking as terraformation, they'll already have had the tech to complete completely artificial habitats. They will have had that for decades, if not centuries or more. Think of Ceres, the asteroid-based civilization in the show. It has spin gravity. It's 1/3 the size of Earth. It has room for parks, agriculture, and millions of permanent residents. Think of a fully man-made space station. You could design it in so many ways. Plus, huge bonus, you wouldn't be stuck at the bottom of a gravity well. Think of the barrier that Earth's gravity has presented to the human race. We've only just recently begun clawing our way up out of it at massive expense of time, money, and resources. This barrier simply does not exist in an artificial space habitat. The centrifugal force, it's constantly trying to fling ships away from it. They deal with this in The Expanse somewhat. The Belters, living their entire lives off-planet, see no value in terraforming. They've diverged physically so far from standard Earthlings that they couldn't even tolerate being in a 1G gravity well. The show is financed and produced by Alcon Entertainment. It originally sold 3 seasons to Sci-Fi, which chose not to buy any more, canceling the series in May of 2018. What followed was kind of amazing. Fan uprisings have occurred before with varying levels of ultimate success, depending on the show. The Firefly fanbase, for example, were helpful in getting the Serenity feature film made. The 2006 US TV series Jericho had fans protesting news of a cancellation after its first season aired. The primary method of this protest? Sending nuts to CBS. That's right, I said nuts.
I say peanut, hazelnut, cashew nut, macadamia nut.
Based on this scene from the final episode of Season 1,
there's too many of us, and we are too desperate to give up. You cannot win this.
The American commander sent a one-word reply to the Wehrmacht commander. And it said, nuts.
Nuts.
The campaign was moderately successful. They did win a follow-up, though short, season 2 of Jericho. Protesting Expanse fans amassed over 100,000 signatures for an online petition. They lobbied Amazon and Netflix to pick up the series, and a GoFundMe crowdfunding campaign paid for a Save the Expanse banner to be flown around Amazon studios. Some well-known celebrities who were big fans of the show supported this campaign, including Will Wheaton, George R.R. Martin, and Patton Oswalt. Obviously, the fans won. Amazon Prime Video picked up the series for a 4th season, released in December 2019, and based on its success has renewed the series for another 2. Now, the upcoming season, Season 6, it is likely to be the last that we see. However, the authors of the novels, Daniel Abraham and Ty Frank, they have stated that they view Season 6 as a pause rather than a conclusion, and that Alcon Entertainment is very committed to the IP overall. Furthermore, executives at Alcon have stated that they are considering all kinds of interesting possibilities, so all may not be lost after Amazon concludes its 6th season. The books, in fact, extend far further than the show has covered thus far. There are 8 published with another 2 announced. The show generally ties the events of each season to the happenings of one novel, though there have been some out-of-sequence mix-ups done for cinematic purposes that actually have worked out pretty well. This means, hopefully, that there will be a lot of story left to tell. I say hopefully because the writers of Season 6, possibly taking a fatalistic end-of-the-journey approach, could try to cram the remaining 5 books worth of story into the remaining episodes. This would, I think, corrupt the flow of the story and possibly poison any future efforts to continue the show. In summary, you should really start watching The Expanse. There's 5 seasons of the most awesome TV you'll ever see, with a 6th one on the way. It's well worth your time. Also, read the books. Everyone read more books in general. Then you won't spell like a moron. Kids these days can't spell. It's really annoying. So thanks for tuning in.